It is a cold and brisk late January day, and I am your host, Larry Crane, on this Logic and Larry episode. Welcome to it. I wasn't planning on doing so many frequent episodes so back to back, but since Trump has gotten into office, I told you I was hoping for the best. I wanted the best, and I still want the best, but things have just been coming rapid fire, and I feel like these little interludes are necessary for my sanity, your sanity, and they give you something to listen to. They give you something to vibe with. Once again, we're going with no music today, just to catch up on the week's events, which have been a little wild. Talk about things. Once again, everything I say in this podcast is strictly my own opinion as a private citizen. Nothing I say on this podcast in any way reflects the opinion or position of any other person or any other entity. I'm speaking you completely in my private capacity as a private citizen about matters of public concern. Let you know we keep it real. So, first and foremost, my heart goes out, my thoughts go out, and the nation's thoughts go out to American Airlines Flight 5342, which was en route from Wichita, Kansas to Washington, D.C. last night. Collided with a Black Hawk helicopter, which was a military helicopter. They are still fact-finding. First, it is a recovery mission in the Potomac. Sadly, no survivors are expected. There were, I believe, 60-plus passengers on the flight. It was a regional subcontractor flight that flew for American Airlines regionally. There were, I believe, 4 crews, 60 passengers, something in that ballpark. I think maybe 3 service members on the Black Hawk helicopter. Absolute tragedy. They continue to recover people. The fuselage was apparently in 3 pieces at the bottom of the Potomac. At least pieces of it were upside down. So that's a catastrophic hull loss incident. And that would be, I believe, the first major hull loss incident with fatalities since 2009 in the flight from Newark to Buffalo, which was another regional flight where everybody on board died due to issues on the approach to Buffalo. These tragedies are not common in the United States in aviation. They haven't been for some time. So it's quite sad that, it's been over a decade and now we have our first major plane crash. And now fact-finding commences and prevention methods commence, and we get to the bottom of what happened. But as of right now, our thoughts and sentiment should just be with the loved ones of those lost and those lost themselves who clearly didn't expect this to happen on a random Wednesday night flight. And, we jump right in. We have the president of the United States, Donald Trump, who goes out to give a speech, a press conference following this catastrophic situation in D.C. And his press conference quickly devolves into, accusations about DEI hires and what he's done to prevent DEI. No mention of the fact that he's gotten rid of the head of the Coast Guard, the head of the TSA, all in recent weeks because of part of his push to end, quote, DEI. And he's harping on the fact that he wants the most intelligent, most qualified people in positions. And I understand the abstract ideological argument as to, if you're simply relying on identity balancing, are you sacrificing meritocracy? But why is it necessarily that DEI equates to not having the most talented people in power? I mean, is this thinly veiled racism? Because that's what it sounds like to me. Like, you can't have DEI and also have the most qualified people at the helm of important positions. That's not mutually exclusive. And the fact that Trump is trying to make it mutually exclusive is more than suspect. And these tactics have been employed by fascist regimes throughout history, finding a scapegoat, finding some group of people based on their identifiers that are the cause of your ills, and blaming DEI for a tragic plane crash, which we don't even know. There's been no fact finding. There's been no, investigation, and there always is an extensive investigation after any aviation incident. And there hasn't been any of that yet. And he's already saying that DEI is the problem. And this is eerily similar to all the nonsense you heard from the right-wing echo chambers during the California wildfires, where DEI was the constant rallying cry of people. Not how can we get these people help, not what a tragedy this is, not, my heart goes out like it was in Carolina, but no, it's this is DEI, and it again speaks volumes about the type of personality that flocks to and identifies with this Trumpist ideology, where you didn't hear people on the left, I understand, I talked about this. Asheville is a liberal place in Western North Carolina, but other sections of Western North Carolina, you didn't hear people say, well, this is atonement for their conservative policies or anything, because it would be absurd to say. It would be absurd to say. And you didn't hear that when tragedies happen in red areas, but as soon as something happens in a place like California, Los Angeles, all of a sudden all these people are rallying and blaming their politics for it. I mean, that shows a low caliber person, a low caliber thought process, and a person of low moral compass and low integrity. And so you have the president of the United States. The first thing he does is get up there, starts blaming DEI, and starts trying to say that Biden did this or Biden did that. Well, I got news for Donald Trump. This is his presidency now. Just like everybody wanted to say, regardless of external contextual factors with inflation under Biden and whatever, this was Biden's presidency, he gets blamed. Well, you're less than 2 weeks in and you have the first major aviation crash in decades. So, there are certainly contextual factors. You certainly need to have an investigation, but you're the president. And rather than owning it and saying, we will get to the bottom of this, and my heart goes out to those who are affected. I am the president. The buck stops here. We're going to make sure that we rectify whatever happened. He starts going to blaming his predecessor, blaming DEI and all these other nonsensical things. And I think, couple that with when he lost the election 4 years ago, and he cried like a baby, refused to participate in the transition, tried to steal the election. But then this time when he wins, it's the exact opposite from Biden-Harris. They're participating in the transition. They are certifying the election. They're being congratulatory. They're being stand-up people. If you are willfully ignorant, if you can't see now, and this isn't me trying to chastise you. This is for you to contemplate on your own time, away from me, away from this show. If you don't see, and you can't see, or you refuse to see what's blatantly obvious in front of you about the character of Donald Trump and his movement, when there are example after example where you have apples to apples comparisons of how people handle things, if you can't see his low moral character and his, just not being a stand-up guy, then you are willfully lying to yourself at this point. And it's getting to a point where it's pathetic now. I mean, you're looking silly. It's pathetic because the objective truth can't be run from that much. And so this caps off, a 2-week period since Trump's been inaugurated of just pettiness, actions that are unbecoming of the office, actions that are unbecoming of honorable people. And I can't stand idly by and not speak about it. We recently saw when Trump came into office, he stripped Anthony Fauci, who was his official. Anthony Fauci worked for Trump. That's how he got on the scene. He was in the Trump administration. And he strips Anthony Fauci of his security detail. And we know Fauci's gotten threat after threat because of his participation in the whole COVID pandemic and people all over the place who want somebody to blame and are really unhinged. He's been threatened. His family's been threatened. He had a security detail. One of the first things Trump does is take away the security detail. Now, I can understand investigating, is the security detail still needed? Could it be toned down? What's the expense? What's the necessity? How can we better serve? Make sure he's safe, but not, spend too much. All that is rational conversation. But that's not what happened. He just stripped him of a security detail as soon as he came in. He releases 15,000 criminals who engaged in the siege of the U.S. Capitol building on January 6th in 2021. And Pete Hegseth gets appointed to be defense secretary. And one of the first things he does is strip General Mark Milley of his security detail. Now, remember, Mark Milley participated in killing an Iranian general and obviously has a target on his back for being a 4-star important general in the United States military. So simply unilaterally, Pete Hegseth, a guy who served for a minute and then is a civilian who was a TV personality, he gets into the Secretary of Defense job, and the first thing he does is strip a 4-star celebrated, recognized general of his security detail. They remove his picture from the Pentagon as a general, and they say they are going to investigate, have the OIG, Office of Inspector General, investigate whether he should lose his rank and be demoted for not following the chain of command, quote unquote, and not going along with President Trump and what he wanted to do. And you look at this as just forget everything, a stand-up guy, a good human. And, you see a United States 4-star general who has served admirably for his entire career, who decided to not just go blindly along with what Trump, who was clearly a unhinged, he's a criminal. Trump is a criminal. He's a convicted felon. Didn't want to go along with what a criminal wanted to do, a person of low character wanted to do, because he adhered to the oath he took in the Constitution. And they're talking about the chain of command. You need to just follow it. Otherwise, you get demerit. That's nonsense. I can tell you as an attorney, when you're an attorney, you take an oath of ethics as an attorney. You being an attorney is your personal license. That's your personal licensure to be an attorney. And you can be disbarred from being an attorney for doing anything unethical. And I'll tell you, it's never an excuse that somebody who was your boss at a given job tells you to do something. And if you follow orders knowing that it's unethical, that's still your license. They're still going to take your license for being unethical. You have a duty as an oath taker. You have a duty to the United States. You have a duty to the citizens you serve. You have an ethical obligation not to follow orders that are detrimental to the oath you took, that are detrimental to legality, that are detrimental to the people of the United States of America. And so it's more admirable that he stood up to his boss and did the right thing than not following him. But you have Pete Hegseth, who now wants to strip him of his rank because he dared to go against Trump. And this is something that's really concerning, because Trump also fired a ton of inspectors general, and he wants to appoint inspectors general who are loyal to him. He has put the National Security Council, which is normally nonpartisan groups of individuals who confer with the president on intelligence, military operations, security, things like that. He has put them on leave. They are looking into whether they can be trusted and try to appoint loyalists into the National Security Council. This is not the philosophy. This is not the ideology. This is not the process of a group of leaders, right? A group of people that have their own brains, who stand on morals, who stand on ethics, who you can trust. They are assembling a group of people who are, they're followers. And who are followers that'll follow somebody blindly, either for their own gain or because they need that sense of security? People who will blindly follow Donald Trump or blindly follow anybody without having their own critical thoughts and their own, perspectives. Those are weak people. Those are weak people. Those are people that you don't want in those positions, because if you have to follow somebody blindly and you turn into somebody who's a sycophant for anybody, you're a weak human being. You don't really deserve to have any deference or any title, and you're not the person I want in charge. But yet, Trump is systemically going through with his cronies and his peons, and he's cleansing, in his words, basically, the departments and the government of people that don't agree with him, but whom he can count on to be blindly loyal. And that is very dangerous and very, it's tragic, and it's pretty scary. But I'm not sitting here to make you scared. I mean, we got to get ready to confront this head on. We're not going to run from this. I mean, these people are weak people. As I said, these are people who will follow anything Trump says or does, which means they have questions about what their fortitude is, right? If you have to follow something and you can't ever be critical of somebody, then you have some weakness in you that it makes me know that I can beat you, I can defeat you, because you are not a person of integrity. You are not an upstanding citizen. So within the bounds of legality and ethics, and being a good person, I'm obviously, watching this closely, and you should too, because you can't let negative criminality and low moral character overrun your society when you're there to push back on it. And everybody should be pushing back on it. We have the First Amendment for a reason, and we should all be using it to speak out against things that aren't right, and things that are of public importance that we should be critical of. It's simply it's not good. And the things that have happened, I said I wish Trump well, and I still do, but he's not rising to the occasion in any sense of the word. He is actually diminishing himself and becoming less and less somebody that I think has what it takes to lead anything, to be honest with you. So, this is where we are. The January 6th situation is troubling, given that all these people were pardoned. It's tragic. So Ed Martin has been appointed to be the United States Attorney for the District of Washington, D.C. And what's been reported is that Ed Martin's going through, he's demanding prosecutors' files and notes, and he is going after, and I don't know, there's been no reports that he's going after them criminally or anything, but he is investigating the investigators. Investigating the investigators who investigated January 6th insurrectionists. Now, when you attack a Capitol building, you assault police officers, you break into a federal building in an effort to thwart a free election, you are a criminal. And Trump could have pardoned you, and that's fine, but your actions were still criminal. You were lawfully prosecuted, and you were lawfully convicted. You are a criminal. And Ed Martin now, this report that he's going through his own office to try to go after or criticize or be critical of prosecutors who charged people with obstruction for engaging and participating in that activity is scary, and it's a bit troubling. Now, for his part, Ed Martin has said that it's insulting that those emails leaked, and that, he's simply trying to make sure that decisions were made, properly, that there wasn't a waste of government resources in prosecuting these obstruction charges. And, you can, if the obstruction charge shouldn't have been pursued for whatever reason, then I guess you can make an argument that he has a reason to review it. But, this is a guy who was adamant that January 6th people should not be prosecuted, that it was a political persecution and a witch hunt. And now all of a sudden he's getting the job and he's starting to investigate the investigators. And this is the exact type of gaslighting and disrespect for truth and objective reality that really infuriates me. You do something wrong, somebody investigates you, they should not be held accountable for investigating a criminal just because you don't like it. I mean, that's just the most ass backwards thing, the biggest affront to justice I've ever heard. It's absurd. And it really should not even be. The fact that it's even fathomable in our society is a huge indictment on the current state of our society. Let's keep it 100. So Trump has not come in and held his head high. He's come in and got directly into that swamp. And it's troubling, to say the least. Now, we will see where all of this goes in terms of this retribution and these people put in positions, and how far they dig backwards to try to discredit people and shame people who did the right thing. And make no mistake, it's not just a right-wing thing. I mean, I can't stand when I see these ultra-liberal district attorneys going after their own people and mandating that they don't seek certain penalties, and mandating that they don't prosecute certain crimes, even though the crimes are on the books. I mean, you should have some discretion, and you should trust your people to do the right thing, and people should do the right thing. And if they don't do the right thing, that's one issue. But if they're doing the right thing, these grand political ideologies that undermine the brave men and women in law enforcement who go out and do this every day is never a good thing. No matter how you slice it, it's never a good thing. And it's shameful, and it's troubling to see. Now, in other news, Trump settled a lawsuit he had against Meta. Now, Meta banned Trump after he incited the insurrection, or helped to, or at least in Meta's estimation, helped to incite it. Meta now paid Trump $25 million to settle the lawsuit. And I would keep an eye on Meta since Mark Zuckerberg has cozied up to Trump, because there is a pending Federal Trade Commission lawsuit against Meta, which may make it break up some of its holdings with Instagram and whatnot, because it holds too much of a monopoly. And I think not only does it hold too much of a monopoly on the tech industry, but it holds too much of a monopoly on free speech. And since Facebook and Instagram and all of these places have kind of become the arena on free speech, no one private company should have a stranglehold on these entities. And I would love if Facebook was forced to break up some of its holdings and maybe separate from some of its subsidiaries and let them go out independently to create more competition for the American people and the American consumer. But I'd keep a close eye, because Trump has control over that lawsuit to some extent, and he's demanding loyalty. And now that Meta has settled with Trump for $25 million and Mark Zuckerberg is lining up to be his best friend, I'd watch what happens with that lawsuit. Because if Zuckerberg's able to get out of it with a small fine or some other nonsense rather than separating from some of his holdings, then the American people lose, and what's right and what's just loses, and true capitalism loses, and we are back to crony capitalism. And it's funny, because all these people that vote for Trump say they want to drain the swamp, and they want to be done with crony capitalism, and he believes in the people, and he's an outsider, and if he does that, he's proving that he's the most inside swamp creature there is. That's the ultimate gaslight that goes on. That's the ultimate absurdity of the entire Trump movement, is the flat out contradictions in almost everything that goes on. It's really absurd. It's really absurd, and I would keep an eye on that. So as he swims through the swamp as our new president of the United States and continues to be petty, and an example that I would never want a son or daughter or any young person to ever look to, because it's just a terrible example of what you should be. There have been ICE raids, and there was always this discussion of, mass deportations under Donald Trump. And one of the first things he was going to do when he got into office was conduct these raids and have a mass deportation. And here's what I'll say about that, because people get distracted by things that they really shouldn't get tied up in. So one of the first things Trump does is he signs an executive order that rescinds, birthright citizenship. And birthright citizenship basically means, if you're born on American soil, no matter who your parents are, no matter where you came from, if you're born on American soil, you automatically become a citizen. And Trump wrote an executive order to rescind that. Now, a judge already halted that order. It's obviously blatantly unconstitutional, because birthright citizenship is a part of the Constitution. So an executive order can't get rid of it. But Trump wants to stir up controversy with that. Why? For a few reasons. One, it doesn't actually have any teeth. So people who are opponents of him are going to spend a heck of a lot of time trying to fight him on something like birthright citizenship. It's going to get a ton of press. It's going to get a ton of pushback in the media. It's going to get a ton of controversy, but it's really completely toothless. It's of no event, because it's never going to pass as an executive order. It would need a constitutional amendment. That's not going to happen. And so it's a waste of everybody's time. Further, there are scams and there is fraud. I hate to break it to you, where people do try to get on U.S. soil, and they try to have a kid on purpose without authorization, so that that kid becomes a U.S. citizen, even though the parents have no love for the United States. They don't want anything positive. They don't even necessarily want to move here full time. But if their kid is an American citizen, then they get all kinds of benefits and all kinds of windfalls and things that they don't get. And now this kid is entitled to all these things, even though legitimately they didn't move here, they didn't re-domicile here, and they shouldn't be here. And it was through fraudulent means that they got here. And so when you start to push back against the birthright citizenship argument, conservatives have a whole heck of a lot of evidence to say, well, you must support criminality because look at all the scams that happen due to birthright citizenship. Now, should there be some kind of amendment or law that if you obtain birthright citizenship by means of fraud or by nefarious means, that you do not get that citizenship? I mean, maybe there's a common sense solution here. But long story short, it's a distraction because it's already on pause. It was never going to happen anyway, and it distracts you from what's really going on. Now, when it comes to ICE raids and immigration, there have been several raids. There have been groups of people who were arrested and shipped back to the countries of origin. And it should be noted that up to this point, most of the people that have been arrested, that have been sent back, are people that have criminal records, committed crimes while here, entered the country illegally, or entered the country and sought asylum but never showed up to their hearing. So the people being deported are people that legitimately on paper have a reason to be deported. And some of the operations would have even happened under Biden. So some of the outrage at the Trump ICE stuff is a little bit misplaced, and people should understand that. There are raids going on, and I can't get down with, and I can't be somebody who says that you should never be deported. Like, if you commit a crime in this country, a felony, and you are not here legally, or you commit a crime and you are here legally but you're not a citizen and the penalty is deportation, you should be deported. Like, if you're acting nefariously, you should 100% be deported. And I don't think that it's wise to go toe-to-toe against ICE enforcement and immigration enforcement when the enforcement taking place is under legitimate, means. And so far, it's mostly been under legitimate means. So the media can hype it up and all that, but again, you're spinning your wheels, because when you argue against that and the evidence and receipts comes back that it's criminals or that it's people that, were not supposed to be here for one reason or the other, you lose credibility doing that. So now, if DACA recipients, dreamers, are stripped of their rights, or people who are here awaiting asylum applications, who have not committed any crimes, who are working, or people that are here with families who, again, are productive, working, even if they came here illegally, if they start getting rounded up en masse and shipped away, then we're going to have a real problem. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you that that's not the plan. I mean, I'm sure that at some point Trump may try to do that, and then that may be the time to push back. But at this stage, that's not the bulk of what's been occurring. So people should be mindful of that fact and not rush to get up in arms about things that you might not have the best ground to stand on. That's just an observation from me about what's going on as I pay attention to these things. So keep that in mind, and be careful about, when you're scrolling through the internet, be careful about rage bait and what is baiting you, what the rage bait is, if you should take the rage bait, if it's something you really should be uncomfortable with, like what's going on with Mark Milley, or firing the inspectors general, or whether it's, something that has maybe a legitimate basis and you shouldn't be too up in arms about yet. And that leads me to another thing, which is, we are so steady in our silos in this country right now. And a lot of it has to do with gerrymandering in certain congressional districts. It has to do with social media and the fact that we're in these intellectual silos and these echo chambers that don't allow for any free exchange of ideas and convince people so adamantly that they are always in the right. There's a lot of reasons for this, but we are in a place where people are under the false impression that the only way to push back against something that's not right is with one particular ideology or one particular thing that they think is right. What I mean by that is, it seems that most people, or many people who are trying to come out as an intellectual counterbalance to Trumpism, find it necessary to double and triple and quadruple down on attacking capitalism as a whole, attacking America and its origins as a whole, and hanging their hat so consistently on, Marxism and extreme leftism as a means to an end. And now look, if you're advocating for a physical overthrow, and of course I'm not in any way, never will, of something, or you're saying that, you truly believe that America is inherently corrupt and that's your idea and theory, then I understand why you're saying that. But if the motivation here is to change hearts and minds, and the motivation here is to get America back on the right track, and you read so many of the things that, conservatives, who have now morphed away from being conservatives in the traditional sense altogether and are now simply just the party of Trump. If you watch these people and what they've done, they've infiltrated the courts with different organizations that put up certain ideological types of judges. They've infiltrated, schools with vouchers that send kids to religious schools. They've won court cases in the name of, quote, religious freedom that really allows a lot of times for discrimination based on one using their religion as an excuse. There's been a lot of legal battles, political battles that have been won by Trumpism because the hearts and minds and the thought war has been heavily on their side. And in a nation where a good amount of impressionable people or people in general are rightfully skeptical of Marxism and the fact that socialism has, in almost every case throughout human history, you want to talk about fascism and you want to talk about strongmen leaders and scapegoating groups of people. I mean, that's well-documented history that Trump supporters don't seem to pay much attention to, and it's infuriating. Well, you can't ignore the other side of that coin, which is that socialism throughout much of human history hasn't been responsible for a lot of human suffering, has been responsible for a lack of freedoms and personal autonomy, and has been oppressive in almost every iteration of itself as well. So when you are primarily hanging your hat on Marxism, anti-capitalism, and that's your rhetoric constantly, it doesn't hit very well, I think, with people that could over time get to your side or with the society that I'd want to live in. I think the counterbalance to a Donald Trump is a traditional, a John Adams, the aristocracy of the intelligent, the intellectual, those who are fair-minded, who are ethic-driven, who believe that a free, autonomous system wherein everybody can realize their full potential and talent, or fail if they don't have it, but there's still obviously got to be a social safety net. There should be some elements of socialism there for the social safety net, which we already have well established in this country. But that capitalism in not crony capitalism, not corporatism, but true, you open a sub shop, you open a landscaping company, you open a farm, you open a woodworking shop, you are an entertainer, you sell your photos, whatever it is, you should be allowed to have private industry and private enterprise, and people should have autonomy to make decisions. And I think that's the counterbalance to this, what looks a lot like fascism in terms of Trumpism, not this other extreme, which is Marxism, because we've seen time and time again now. Why are we getting this? And Kamala Harris was not a Marxist candidate by any stretch of the imagination, but a lot of those positions were pinned on her from the 2020 election, and a lot of the positions of other politicians and other movements were pinned on her, and you see what happens. We are now getting this level of nonsense we're getting from our current administration because the counterbalance was something people deemed absolutely unacceptable. And sadly, it was preferable to them to go with somebody like Trump as opposed to something that they deemed to be far to the left and socialist and Marxist. And so the counterbalance doesn't always have to be that extreme left position. And if you're an intellectual, ideological person who's so hell-bent on being a Marxist and that's your pet ideology, then so be it. But I think a lot of other people would do well to expand their horizons a little bit and think really critically about why they paint themselves into that corner and why they think that that is the only way forward and the only counterbalance. I think there's a lot more in between to counterbalance what we're seeing that's a lot more palpable and, quite frankly, in my personal opinion, a lot more desirable than where they are painting themselves. And that's just how I feel about that. And I think it would be more effective to speak in those terms instead of speaking in the, other terms people choose to which paints them into that corner, which people find easy to reject. Just like when you're standing on the wrong basis when you're talking about immigration or you're talking about those things. I mean, it's hard to be consistent. It's hard to be consistent when you're saying, you're against all policing and all law enforcement, and then turn around and be incensed that Trump let out a bunch of insurrectionalists. That it becomes a zero-sum game if you don't believe in any objective standard of law and order. And so you lose a lot of ground to stand on. It's much easier to say, hey, I believe in law and order. Anybody who ransacks a federal building, whether that be, far leftists in Seattle or far right Trump people in Washington, I'm against all of that. Now your ground is much more solid, and you're much people see much more credibility in you when you can maintain those. Otherwise, it just looks like you're only happy when your side wins and you don't care about the means. And that gives credibility to the other side doing it. And I don't believe in any of that. That's not the way to have a society. What people have to understand is that a healthy society is a society wherein there are several different people with several different belief systems, some intolerable, some simply you don't agree with. But those in charge of governing those people should be able to provide them with security in their possessions, in their property, in their person. The security to express their ideas, the security to share and write their ideas, the security and the health to start businesses, to traverse roads, to traverse cities, to have safe transportation. And the ideological battles that occur within people's argument and debates is really not for the government to force on anybody. You shouldn't be taking this rigid ideology into government and trying to force everybody else in the society to believe and abide by your rigid ideology. And that's the problem I see with absolutism, whether that be a dictatorship and a fascist one with the absolute loyalty to an individual or movement, or on the other side with the socialism, which is an absolute adherence to that philosophy and movement, and an absolute stripping of autonomy as far as economic autonomy in order to abide by that. Those absolutes don't do it for me, because I believe in true freedom. And true freedom is the freedom of thought, the freedom of autonomy. And we are getting so far away from that in our whole political debate. It's moved so far away from that. And it's also moved to a place, you had RFK now at his hearing. And by the way, these Senate confirmation hearings, what's the point of them, right? If these Senate confirmation hearings were what they used to be or what they were supposed to be, or at least what the theater says they are, which were actual inquiries into the nature, character, background, qualifications of these individuals, and then the Senate actually voted on that based on the merits and qualifications of the individual, rather than a bunch of political backdoor nonsense and loyalties, they would be much more useful. And with lower level judges, I think, appointees and lower level personnel, they maybe have a little more genuineness to them. But with these high end appointees like, a Hegseth, a Patel, an RFK, it's like an exercise in nonsense. It's theater for the news cameras. But what actually comes of it? Is anybody actually swayed? People know they're going to vote one way or the other before they put them up. And if not, you see with like Matt Gaetz, they pull them before they even go up. So what's the point of these things? There's really no point. But RFK goes up there and he's talking about he was a heroin addict for 14 years. And if you read RFK's history, he's got quite a rocky life. Now, okay, he was a heroin addict for 14 years. He's recovered. And should we hold past addictions or ills against people? Absolutely not. When people want to better themselves and they're well qualified for a job, they should 100% be able to get it, and they should be celebrated for digging themselves up from a low point in life 100%. But RFK is a privileged silver spoon guy. He's got to be one of the most privileged silver spoon people that has come up for a position in recent memory. He's a Kennedy. His father was the Attorney General of the United States, was a prominent candidate for president. His uncle was the president. He's clearly a privileged individual. So you're that privileged, and then you're addicted to heroin for 14 years, and then you get appointed because of your name, basically, because you decided to run and then sell your soul to whichever candidate was willing to give you something. You dump a dead cub in Central Park. You've done a lot of weird things. But my point in saying all that is, it seems like in this country today, we're in a constant battle on both sides of the ideological spectrum to placate the lowest common denominator, right? If it's the left, it's defund the police, everybody who's ever in trouble, anybody who's, committing a crime, acting as a miscreant, not doing the proper things, not contributing to society. They deserve money. They deserve coddling. They deserve for you to get away from them because all you are is a bourgeois, person protecting the interest of private companies. It doesn't matter that there's a huge population in this country that doesn't pull their own weight, that are takers, not givers, that are not producers. That doesn't matter. We are catering to them, and we care more about them than the people that go out every day and work their ass off to drive this country forward. And on the other side, it's the same thing. How many Trump supporters are sitting at home, they're collecting public assistance, they're not even contributing, but then they're lashing out about DEI and blaming somebody who might be a minority, LGBTQ or black or brown for their troubles, when in reality, they are non-productive. They are the ones who couldn't go out and do better and attain that position. It's not the fault of somebody who's black or brown or LGBTQ or a woman that they were able to go out and obtain that position. If they don't get those positions because you blame DEI, it's not going to elevate you because you still have haven't been productive enough. And of course, some people deserve help. People deserve social safety nets. People don't deserve to be starving. Kids don't deserve to be starving in this country. But why are both sides, and then RFK was all these Trump supporters are always recovering this and got out of jail this, and these people were locked up but now they're out. I mean, why are we always so obsessed with the former addict, the former convict? And not that you shouldn't be, not that those people don't deserve space, not that those people don't deserve redemption stories, not that those people should not be hailed for overcoming what they've overcome. But how about the people that never were in those situations? How about the people that came from poverty or humble beginnings or challenges, or didn't know anybody, or didn't have any family connection, or didn't have any family name, who have always done the right thing, who may have stumbled here or there, but they weren't addicted to drugs for years on end, weren't in prison for something, that made something of themselves and have been productive and good citizens for the entirety of their lives? Why do we have so little deference? Why do we have so little attention paid to those people on either side of the spectrum? Why am I watching somebody who is unhinged, who had a privileged family name, who was addicted to heroin? His brother died of heroin overdose while he's going to people's apartments, shooting heroin, sleeping with women, all these things. He's now going to be the head of human health and services, and people are applauding it. It's like, yeah, good for his redemption story. But why are we so constantly looking to bolster those people at the detriment of all the productive Johns and Sallys and whoever is across this country, of every creed, of every race, of every class, who are busting their ass every day to make the world a better place, to do what's right, to do right by their family and their community and their citizens? First responders, you think they care right now in this plane crash what your political persuasion is or whatever else? They're rushing to do the right thing to help. Where are these people in our dialogue? And so many people have bought into this Trumpism being the key because they think the left has abandoned them. But I got news for you. When Trump's making deals with Zuckerberg and Musk and doing crooked things and firing people who aren't loyal to him and looking to demote 4-star generals who did their duty for you. Milley did it for you. You want to smack him in the face for doing something for you, the people of the United States. Where are all the people that strive and work hard to do the right thing, that uphold integrity? Where is their deference to those people? Where is their attention to those people? We watch the pettiness unfold, and we watch the rhetoric go back and forth. And we watch people trying to grandstand and pretend they're righteous because they're always placating these segments of society. What about the working class, middle class, people of America who go out every day, get up, and they're struggling? They're struggling to buy a house. They're struggling to pay their mortgage. They're struggling to send their kid to daycare. They're struggling with their health insurance. They're struggling because the food they eat, they don't know if they can trust it. They're struggling because they don't know if they can trust their government to keep things running, keep the lights on without tearing each other apart over petty loyalties for themselves. Where is the deference? Where is the concern for those people? Where is it? And so I sit here today and I look at what's going on, and I look at how things have devolved, and I'm disheartened. But I won't stop being persistent. I won't stop letting out and talking to you about what's right. And I won't let you stop. Spread this podcast. Spread this message. We will remain being objective, doing what's right, discussing the flaws in these major philosophies, discussing the fact that the algorithm has continued to reinforce and bolster these ideologies at the expense of objective conversation and at the expense of paying attention to the people who need you to pay attention to the most and deserve it most. And I'm not going to be painted into a corner one way or another, nor will I turn a blind eye for my own sanity. There's always why don't you just turn a blind eye? Why don't you turn it off for a while to relieve your stress? Yes, we're all entitled to turn it off for a while to relieve our stress. And we should be doing that. We should be practicing mental health and taking a deep breath. You can't convince the world in one day arguing on a Facebook post. But you've got to continue reading, educating yourself, and speaking out when it's appropriate. And you got to not let yourself be painted into a corner. I refuse to look away. I refuse to disengage. I refuse to take a groupthink position one way or the other because it's convenient and I feel secure in a group. Be a leader every day. Be a Logic and Larry leader. A Logic and Larry leader, that's what you are. Go out and spread the word. Go out and maintain your persistence and persevere through everything that's happening. This is just the very beginning. We will stay knowledgeable. We will stay vocal. We will stay upstanding citizens. And I will talk to you again very soon. Logic and Larry is out. Enjoy your weekend.